everybody, and welcome to this interregional session that's joining the Pacific and the Caribbean. I don't know whether to say good morning, evening, afternoon. It's the strangest of hours for us in our various parts of the world, but it's really fantastic that we were able to find a time to come together for this session, and I thank the technicians and everyone who arranged to make this session at this hour possible. Thank you very much. Before we begin, just some housekeeping rules about the platform so you can take most advantage of it. We have interpretation in English, French, and Spanish that's available on the right-hand side of your platform, of your screen. When you turn on interpretation, you need to turn down the source volume of the main platform, otherwise you hear two voices at once. We also have a chat. You need to sign into the chat if it's your first time using it. Please use your social media or account or email, and you'll have access to the chat, and we encourage you to comment and ask questions, and those will be relayed to the speakers in the panel. We also have a survey at the bottom of the session page, and hopefully at the end of the session, you can fill out that survey and give your feedback to us on the content and future planning to help us in our next Congress. So very happy to start off this session. This session brings together PWWA and CARIWAP, which are presenting two different regions, the Pacific and the Caribbean, which share very unique contexts and particular cross-cutting issues on how utilities deal with water and sanitation service provision in small island developing states. As GWAPA, we're committed to supporting the development of this kind of interregional WAP that allow the exchange between these small island developing state countries, including the share of information and best practices to improve water and sanitation service provision in both regions. The Pacific Water and Waste Association, PWWA, and CARIWAP signed an MOU in 2005 to foster their further collaboration under the guise of the GWAPA platform. Together, they put that together, and in this session, we're really hoping to learn about some of these common cross-cutting issues between these regions and discuss how they can boost this cooperation and move their partnership one step forward. I would now like to introduce representatives from the two platforms who are going to be our moderators today. First, Ms. Aleti Satuala, who is a Samoa national, and she worked at the Samoa Justice Department as a court registrar before embarking on a very fulfilling journey as a program manager with AusAid APIA for 10 years. Her experience, though, has expanded a lot since she joined PWWA, working alongside 30 water utilities around the Pacific and close to 70 water suppliers, consultancy firms and companies based in New Zealand, Australia, and the Pacific. Ms. Aleti has a bachelor's degree in history from the National University of Samoa. Welcome, Ms. Aleti. And from the Caribbean, Ignacio Jean, who is a national from St. Lucia. He's the executive director of CAWASA. He has been since 2014, and he's a member of the Executive Council of the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association since 2019. He has over 3 decades of service in regional and international organizations, technical cooperation, and government. And his experience in the water sector includes coordination of regional and international water operator partnerships. He has an MSc in agricultural management and a postgraduate diploma in agricultural economics from the University of Reading. That's a full introduction to both of our moderators. Please welcome and have the floor.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'll share my...
Ignatius, we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, and thank you. I hope you can see my slides now.
Yeah, you can hear me now. Right, thank you.
Okay. Are you able to see my slides?
Who's presenting now? Is it
Ignatius is you. Is you first.
right? Okay, right, good. So are you getting my screen now? I think you should.
Not yet.
Well, my screen is on my side. Back to basics.
I can
Okay,
share.
please.
I will share. I will share.
Please go ahead. Go ahead. Right. So, good evening, everyone, and we would like to thank Juwapa and particularly Julie for getting us, corralling us together to bring the Pacific and the Caribbean together, as well as Florencia, who has done a tremendous work in staying up all night in Bonn to coordinate with us on either side of the globe. Next slide, please. This collaboration we've had since, well, there's the structure of the CARIWAP, which is we are embedded in the WAPLAC, that is the WAP for Latin America and the Caribbean. And so the Caribbean has formed a subset of that, which is what is called the CARIWAP, and which is the association between the Caribbean Water and Sewage Association, the Association of Water Utilities, and the CWWA, the Secretariat for the Water Professionals, and also includes water utilities. And through this program, I'm just giving you a quick rush of what we look like and some of the responsibilities of helping to get the partners together in the region, particularly through the using the platform of the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association annual conference, where we bring the high-level forum of ministers, as well as it is the forum where we get an opportunity to meet when it was possible in person, but now we have to do that virtually, and so we can meet annually. The next slide, please. In 2015, the Caribbean and the Juwapa signed an agreement coordinated by the UN Habitat at what was I think it was the World Water Forum in South Korea. And that was signed by the then presidents of both associations, Mr. Bernard Etinoff of Kawasa and Mr. Jason Johnson of the CWWA, and the then program manager for the UN Habitat Juwapa, as well as your now late Mr. Tuga. So Latu. Yeah. And we have, since then, we have not had other partnerships or real communications with the Pacific. And so this is a great opportunity for us to rekindle those fires and to get us going again, albeit virtually, during this virtual era. Next slide, please. So that this agreement essentially is calling for us to share and exchange information and experience peer-to-peer support between water and sanitation operators in the Caribbean and the Pacific regions, which will help us to play a full role in delivering and extending quality basic services for all. And one of the things that we were hoping to embark and learn on from the PWWA platform is the very excellent benchmarking protocols that they have, or system that is in place, and which we had embarked on, but we have not pursued it. So hopefully in the near future, if using this platform, we will be able to advance that cause. Next slide, please. And so according to the agreement, the various areas of collaboration would be that we would help to establish water operators partnerships between the Pacific and the Caribbean region. Of course, we share a lot of similarities, the similar vulnerability issues and in disaster management, It will help us with capacity building and also the sharing of information and best practices. So it is, and through this program, and it is very good that we are meeting this evening and this early morning for you, that it shows what can be done using virtual platforms to be able to share information and to be able to help with training, albeit virtually. So we hope that we will be able to build more on this as we move along. And that is why this collaboration with the GWOPA is excellent. Next slide, please. So that prior to this kind of collaboration, we had Mr. Latu had visited the CWWA annual conference in the Bahamas in 2014. And there was the pre-conference workshop that was coordinated by the CARIWAP with support from the GWOPA. As you can see, Mr. Luis, Jose Luis Martin, who was then with the program in Barcelona. And so that was one of these where Mr. Latu presented on the side of the Pacific some of the experiences and where we can be able to exchange, and which led to us signing this agreement in 2015. And I think the next slide ends my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Over.
Mr. Latu?
We cannot hear you, Miss Aleti.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Clearly.
Okay. Thank you, Julie, and also Ignatius for the presentation. I'll just continue on with what Ignatius has mentioned on the MOU that was signed between the two organizations. As you can see from the picture above, that was a photo that was taken at that conference where the MOU was signed. And yes, Latu Kupa has left us earlier in the year. So yeah. So just before I move on to the conference, to the MOU, just a brief background on Pacific Water and Wastewater Association. As you all know, we're a not-for-profit organization that was established in '94 with the main objectives to serve as the principal water and wastewater voice of and for the Pacific Island nations and utilities. We were also to develop on the expertise in the Pacific for sustainable management of water, wastewater services by shaping a cohesive, proficient, and robust water and wastewater sectors. Under the association, we have 30 utilities. We used to have 31, but as you're all aware, PNG, Ediranu, and Water PNG has joined and have merged into one utility. So we're now back to 30 utilities from 21 countries with allied members, as earlier mentioned, from Australia and New Zealand and other part of the Pacific. So the MOU, from the Pacific Water and Wastewater Association perspective, and as also mentioned by our colleague Ignatius, that was signed in South Korea at the 7th Annual Water Forum. We saw that as a platform for cooperation between our two regions. It was also to facilitate cooperation between water and wastewater services between the two regions. basically focusing on capacity development through shared experience, expertise, and knowledge. We also saw that as a better utilization of resources, it should also increase the awareness shared between the two areas. And this was very important in terms of moving forward for both regions. It was also an opportunity to strengthen our relationships, and I think the session that we're having today has sort of we sort of started on that relationships, strengthening that relationships, and just having that conversations on the sector and the issues that we're facing. It was also a chance for PWWA's role to better serve our region. We saw that as an opportunity for us to not only build and strengthen our relationships with other regions, but also to solicit financial support from funding agencies. So from our perspective, that's basically how we saw this MOU, and we're hoping to move forward from here and see how we can collaborate more and strengthen the relationships between the two region. Yeah, and that's it for my end, Ignatius.
Yes. So the next item on the agenda, I think, Ms. Saletti, you will introduce the other. That will be the second panel, which will be Mr. Seymour Singh and Frederick DeRusso. So Ms. Saletti will continue with this part.
Thank you, Ignatius. Yes, so we're now on to our panel discussion number one. Peer support mechanisms for disaster risk management. As you all know, the Pacific and the Caribbeans are amongst the most prone areas to disaster, especially the climate risks, tsunami, earthquakes, cyclones, and of course, pandemic. So these natural calamities have had devastating impacts on our livelihoods, especially for the poorest and most vulnerable people. So we have with us this morning or this evening two presentations from the Pacific. The first presentation will be from Mr. Seymour Sai from Water Authority Fiji. Mr. Seymour is currently the General Manager for Commercial and Corporate Services for Water Authority Fiji, has served WAF for more than 6 years in various roles, including manager, strategic planning, and has also served the regulators for 3 years, regulating water and wastewater. Mr. Seymour have a MBA from USB, BGC in International Relations from the University of Fiji. He's an active member of the Australian Institute of Directors, Australian Human Resources Institute, and Fijian HR Institute. Specializes in strategic planning and monitoring and evaluation. Please welcome Mr. Seymour Sai.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Ms. Saletti. First of all, I'd like to congratulate both parties in having a memorandum between them to be able to have this forum between GEOPA and the PWWA. The presentation from Water Authority of Fiji basically is in two parts, as stated earlier. The first part is looking at the peer support mechanisms for disaster risk management. Now, the second part will look at the benchmarking experience we have with the PWWA under the arrangements of submission of annual data to be able to be benchmarked with the other utilities. Now, this is a presentation proper, and due to time, I will not go through each one of them, but I'll go through briefly on Water Authority, our vision, which is clean water and sanitation for a better life. Now, our responsibility is to 890,000 people in Fiji. And the area that we cover is around 332 islands, of which 114 islands are inhabited. So,
Say more, sorry. We can. Yeah.
sorry about that. Sorry about the glitch. My apologies. Are you able to see my presentation now? Yeah. Sorry. Apologies, everyone. This technology is new for me. I've been using Zoom and Microsoft Teams more. So basically, our overview of our assets and operations to give you a fair view in terms of our responsibility. We have about 45 water sources, treatment plants, and as I said, our responsibility to the entire Fijian population. Our alignment to the Sustainable Development Goals for water and sanitation is SDG number 6. We have aligned our national development plan in the area of water and sanitation. And our act is also aligned when it comes to our strategic plan. We have corporate documents of strategic plan, annual business plan, and then department plans to carry out a number of initiatives in order to make water and wastewater accessible, as well as maintaining the service level standards, which includes the water and wastewater standards. Now, I'll be talking on the actual impact of the COVID-19 as one of the disasters. Many of the scholars around the globe has described COVID-19 as one of the disasters. Apart from the normal cyclones, tsunamis, and hurricanes we've experienced in the Pacific, and if I'm not mistaken, one of the smallest contributors are the Pacific Island countries and Caribbean countries towards the damage we have done to climate, but we are the hardest hit when it happens. And that's our experience in Fiji as well. But this pandemic has been even throughout the globe in terms of how it affects us. We had one of the very large project of a plant that is to be erected in terms of construction. And on the left, you'll see a conceptual layout of Viria water treatment plant. This plant is to support basically the entire Suvarnasuri corridor, which is which houses around 400,000 people, and increase the capacity for production of water and delivery of water by at least 40 megaliters per day. So when the pandemic had hit us, we could not procure supplies, materials. There was stoppage of workers. This is the level of impact we had. Now, the immediate impact that we had, the regions we have in Fiji, there is a single utility, Water Authority of Fiji, through all the regions, the two major islands as well, which is Vitilevu and Vanuatu. So the initial impact is similar to the other friends of ours in the Pacific region and Caribbean. Support structures could no longer support us in the regions, and we had to decentralize most of the decision making. The restriction of movements, we had to apply for permits, set up multiple teams, and then we had taken actions of appointing a task force chair for COVID-19 and its members in April 2021. We started rostering staff and developed our first ever work from home policy safety protocols, which is similar to the other Pacific Island countries. And then the worst case scenario, when we calculated the stocks and the delays that were happening with the supplies, we required to ensure that we had 6 months of stock. So we started ordering them. Being a utility, our funds from the government comes quarterly, and here we are talking about two quarters funds in a single quota when we have half the funds but required twice the amount of stock. So we had to manage all this, including the ICT and its accessibility. The workforce is not known to be able to work from home and support. So at the time of developing the policy, we had to manage reports, manage what the outputs are from home of these workers. Now, the actual impact on operations, we had smaller teams. So something that required 5 or 6 people before, 4 people had to go now. A reduction in required staff, focusing only on providing services. So despite having a 5 to 20-year plans, we have master plans. We were focusing only on delivery of services during this time because of limited resources that could be mobilized on the ground. We had to close some sites whereby if someone is COVID-19 positive, I was one of them in the month of July. There are many of my friends, colleagues who were COVID positive. We have to close those offices, customer service offices, and this led to delayed in attendance to complaints. Now, if you look at the increased side of the impact, fuel, cost of pipes and fittings, the cost of freight went up by at least 42% within the first 3 to 4 months after April. We couldn't address leakages, and that led to non-revenue water rising within the 2 quarters. We have increased ICT expenses because we had to procure so many pocket Wi-Fi's, so many GB of data for the people to be able to work from home. So these were some of the impact in terms of increase in costs. Now, reduction, revenue collection, we stopped disconnections, so revenue collections went down, people took advantage. Number of selection recruitment activities went down. We had reduced performance levels in projects because mobilization of plant and equipment, including people, was not a reality at that time. Now, if you look at impact on operations in delays, though we had the budget to complete most of our projects, we couldn't because of known reasons. Attendance to complaints, testing of water and wastewater samples, though we were carrying out testings, but they were delayed in these times. And we realized that in these times, even if we had regional officers for testing, what we required was to every town to have them, and that is an expensive exercise. So we had to delay or cease disconnection activities and carry out audit on risk activities. These also were delayed, the major risks that we have in operations. Now, some of the learnings we had was importance of planning, safety and family and work-life balance, a decentralization of decision-making, maximizing usage of ICT platforms. If you just seen a while ago, we are not so ICT savvy, so going beyond what we have in terms of ICT platforms would be an answer going forward. Working with limited resources, this has pushed our teams to work with limited resources and yet produce water and wastewater services. The importance of cross-functional teams, working with limited supervision, importance of making audit trails, and the biggest one was mainly maintaining the relationships with stakeholders. What happens if I'll share a small story with you. At about 4:50 in the afternoon, we were told that outside Suva corridor, where there is a lockdown in Lami, someone had to travel to Navua, which is about 50 or odd kilometers, to fix up a switchboard. So the border patrol guys allowed them to go. They went to Navua and heard and received another call that another 100 kilometers away, which is in Singatoka, there is another burnt out switchboard which they need to repair. They had no option because if that's not repaired, the water issues arise in the western region. This team went to western region. While coming back, there at the border again held it outside, just outside Suvarnasori, not allowed in. So I received a call at 11 in the night. At that time, that's when the connections were. We call the PS. He says, I'll allow them to come in, but I cannot allow them to be released from the police checkpoint. So you have to call someone in the police. Now it's 11 in the night. So luckily we had known one of the members in the police force. I have been to school with him, call him up, and then get released. The other thing we realized is that our developing partners, for example, United Nations, we have developing partners like Australia and New Zealand, the Foreign Affairs departments, and Asian Development Bank. We need to know the people and when to tap them for assistance. So these things help us come out of this situation. So some of the learnings we had was to how to be flexible at individual, department, and organization levels, and the importance of safety and health of our rights. We also learned that how important it is to have business continuity plans. No matter what company we still need to provide water and wastewater services. So with all these learnings, when we look at the topic provided to us was peer-to-peer help that we need to get, and we need to get rolling in terms of how we all benefit together. From the authority side, the possibilities to peer support mechanisms, we can create strong ICT foundations, and we can do it collectively in terms of what types of ICT foundations are required for a water utility. And if we need to procure them or go beyond the means that we have now, progressively, we could do it as an association like PWWA or in consultations with GEOPA, to be able to ensure that we get the best of the services, we got the best of the solutions in terms of how we address them. Alignment of procurement activities. Biggest problem during this pandemic has been that our procurement activities, and while talking to some of the utility partners, they face the same issues. So it could be that we can align our procurement activities in terms of collectively saying this is our requirement, this is the various locations you need to deliver, and the possibility of getting a better price, just-in-time delivery, and also an incentive for those who provide these services. That okay, it's now not only Fiji and Tonga and Samoa, I have other countries to deliver this to, so I can reduce my cost in terms of freight. I can use the same ship and dispatch it from Fiji, for example, or Vanuatu. The shared access to development partners. One of the development partner, I won't name them, and they said that we have individual applications from different countries, but our intention now is how does this benefit a number of countries. So if we cannot just give you the solution or the funding, we want a number of countries to benefit. So now this shall push us to have shared access to our own development partners in the Pacific region and the Caribbean, whereby we get together. If our challenges, our areas are common in nature, we need to put ourselves together beyond the boundaries that we have for our countries, our laws, and then set up a mechanism whereby we can say, okay, Asian Development Bank, this is a problem in the entire Pacific region, say for tariff modeling, or say for procurement, and we need assistance in this area in terms of training and development. We need to also strengthen our regional organizations like PWWA. It is doing a wonderful job, and given its platform of 50 memberships and 30 utilities that are there, it has a greater ability to do more than what it can, provided it has the resources. So there is one area we should look at. We can also adopt multiple facets of training, online training, face-to-face, and so forth. And our ability to monitor and evaluate, this is another thing that probably all utilities need to put our heads together and see how we can progressively continue to monitor remotely of our services of water and wastewater. So in our thoughts from Water Authority of Fiji, these are some of the possibilities or support mechanisms we can create going forward, having learned from the pandemic that we have gone through or still going through. And that's a small presentation from my side. My colleague, Mr. Manasa Tusulu, will now share with you the benchmarking exercise in terms of our services of water and wastewater.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I think we'll hear from Manasa when we come down to the benchmarking session. Yes, Manasa?
Yeah,
But thank you,
that's correct.
Mr. Yes. But thank you, Mr. Singh, for that great presentation. I think some few ideas on that last slide we'll be taking note of those. Our second speaker from the Pacific is Mr. Frederick Derosol. Mr. Frederick works at UNALCO as the water department manager. He has an electrical background and has been working with UNALCO for 5 years.
While my colleague is coming online, probably I'll take that minute. One of the things we can go forward doing is now creating multiple sessions with each others, such as these forums, whereby we are able to discuss our challenges in more thoroughness than we have been. And this pandemic whereby it has done a lot of damage. It has taught us a lot of things. And in the Pacific region, as I said, we are the hardest hit during pandemics or during disasters. So what we have absence of now is credible data, apart from the data that PWWA collects from each institution, to be able to make informed decision. So that informed decision can be good in policies, and most of our policies, as one of my mentors have said, it does in the Pacific region, because we are not able to execute because of resources or because of one reason or another. So probably having that heart-to-heart discussions, we'll be able to continue that level of engagement that we want with our developing partners, as well as with each other in our countries.
Yes, well noted, Mr. Seymour. I think it's an important discussion that we need to have.
I guess
and
the
also with
glitches of
our
our technology
Caribbean
teaches us that
colleagues.
we have a lot to learn from.
Yeah, thank you. As I was saying,
solutions that we have.
yes. As I was saying, Mr. Frederick has been with UNALCO for the last 5 years, working with the project and plan department, and his responsibility is water department since 2021 this year. So, Mr. Frederick, I'll just this is your opportunity to speak on disaster risk management and how cyclones has impacted on UNALCO's service.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Hility. Let me share my screen. Okay, I think it's okay. Okay, good afternoon, good morning. So I will present you how we at UNALCO manage the risk of cyclone. In Vanuatu, UNALCO is managing the water and the power distribution, and the plan I will present is a part of the global plan, which involves much more the electrical generation and distribution than the water. In Vanuatu and the South Pacific, the cyclone season is from the 1st November to the end of April, and the main cyclone usually are from mid-February. We follow the rule and the steps created by the Vanuatu governments, who divide the alerts in 3. We have the blue alert, the yellow and the red alert. The blue alert is for cyclone within 48 hours. The yellow is a cyclone within 36, and the red alert is a cyclone within 24 hours. During this step, the main goals are to keep the staff and the building safe and the infrastructure safe, and to keep delivering water to the public. The last past 5 years, Vanuatu was hit by several cyclones, even if we were pretty lucky compared to our neighborhood, our neighbor in the Pacific. The main one were in 2015, the cyclone Pam, who hit Efate and the Thousand Islands. During this cyclone, we lost one of our tanks. We was empty during the cyclone time. In 2018, Ola, who appeared on the east of Vanuatu, crossed the Northern Island and went south to New Caledonia. And the last one was last year in April, right after the pandemic begins. It was Harold in 2020, who hit and create a lot of damages in the South Santo, so in the Northern Islands. And this cyclone keep going to Fiji and Samoa. Unelco managed the water on 2 different locations. At Port Vila, which is the capital, with around 10,000 customers, and in Teuma, which is a community 20 kilometers outside of Port Vila, with around 200 customers. We will focus on the Port Vila network, of course, but everything is suitable for the Teuma network. The network can be simplified like this schematic. The contact tank are filled from the underground sources. A pump station push the water up to various tank sites all around the villa. And a main pipe between the Facio tanks and the wharf tanks have connection to the distribution. So we distribute the community and the people from the tank, but also from one of the main pipes. On this schematic, we can identify where are the risks. Of course, we have the pump stations. If we lost it, we can't supply any water because all the water are pumped. All the tanks are a risk too. All of them are metallic except the tribunal tank, which is the only tank in wood we have here in Villa. Another risk are the air valves. For the strongest cyclones, we will close the inlet and the outlet of the tanks, and by keeping the chambers of the air valve clean, we will avoid any suction of rainwater or dirty water in the pipes. We also have three sea crossings and 2 bridges. So before the cyclone, so it's mean in October, we go through a checklist and we make sure that our staff have the rain equipment and all the necessary tools. They have the keys to access the sites. For the building, we make sure that the area is safe by checking if any tree needs to be pruned. We check, of course, the cyclone shutters, the gutters, the roof. We check the stock of the tarpaulin and various plastic in the pump station. We check the ladders on the tanks to make sure they present no risk to fly away. We check that the inlet and outlet valves at the tanks are working properly, and it's a yearly job. We make sure that all the chambers of the air valves are cleaned. Every year in October, UNELCO organizes cyclone exercise to get the teams used to the procedure and the organizations. It can be a simulation with teams sent on the field or workshops to give the opportunity to everybody to understand what is their job. In 2021, this exercise was done last Thursday on October the 21st. During the blue and the yellow alerts, so it's mean between 48 and 36 hours before the cyclone, we go and check the sensitive room, which are the pump station, the chlorine rooms, especially we check the waterproofness. We make sure that the 2 electrolyzers are working properly. For the team, we distribute the dedicated tools, especially the chainsaw. We check again that all the team have the shovel, the crowbar available. We also check the common tools as the generators or the portable genset or the Sela bottle pump. We fill in all the tank of the car, the trucks, and the gensets. We asked the electrical department to check the waterproofness of the electrical board on the various sites, and we asked them also to check the antenna of the radio, which are located on the tanks. During this time, we stop all the work are on hold. All the work and repair are on hold and can keep going only on the technical director calls. A communication is done to the public and the clients to tell them to store water in bathtub or various containers. Right before the red alert, a last visit is done on the site. We will check that the overflow of the tanks are clean and working properly. We double check that all the manholes are closed, which is usually done. We close the inlet and the outlet of the tanks. So that can depend on the power of the cyclones. The point is to keep the maximum of the tank full of water to avoid to have one of the tank blew up by the cyclone. We note also that as Tribunal is the only Tiber tank, we will bypass it to keep it full. We will also throttle the valves before the sea crossing and the bridges to avoid the big leaks. And the last step will be at the pump station. We will increase the chlorine level to 0.4 milligram per liter. So we can see that our point again is to keep the material and the network safe, but source the water for the customer. We want to try to distribute water as long as we can. Once that's done, we ask all the staff to go back to the house and wait for the red alert to be over. During the red alert, 2 technicians are on duty in the control room where the electrical and the water SCADA is located. Depending on the configuration of the network, it means did we close or not the inlet and the outlet of the tanks. We will ask them to check continuously the water level of the various tanks and to check the flow from the pump station to perchoir tank and fascio tanks. We understand that if the flow increase and the level of the water tank remains the same, it means one of the main pipe to perchoir or fascio is broken. And if the flow remains the same, but the water level in the tanks decrease, it means one of the pipe is broken downstream. In both scenarios, the operators can switch off the dedicated pump remotely. The pump station is powered with an underground cable, so we hope that we decrease the risk of a power cut at least. Once
Sorry,
the red alert,
Frederick. Frederick, you need to. You have 1 more minute left.
Okay, that's my last slide. Once the red alert is over or following the management decisions, we ask the team to go on the attributed site to check the damages, to list them, and if possible, to secure the area. Then all the team meets at the workshop and we prioritize and launch the main works and the main repairs with our contractors. Physics and bacteriologic tests are launched for different locations, underground water sources, the water tanks, and the end of the water and end of the network. Depending on the results, a communication to the public is done. We ask the clients to let the water run for 5 or 10 minutes before drinking it, or to boil it if necessary. The authorities are informed of the damages and informed of the schedule of the works and the repairs. That's end my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Frederick. Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. I think that ends our presentation from the Pacific. I'll now hand over to Ignatius for the Caribbean's presentations on disaster risk management. Thank you, Ignatius.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Letty. We'll move straight into it because we are pressing for time. We're a little behind, so that we have Magnus Williams, who is the chief engineer at the Dominica Water and Sewage Company, the WASCO, is the sole entity in charge of management of water resources of Dominica, providing its residents with potable water supply and sewage services. He's a mechanical engineer who's graduated from the Florida International University. He joined the WASCO in 2003 as a project engineer, receiving training over the years in various aspects of utility operations, water resource management. He's a certified project manager and has overseen the WASCO's engineering department since 2010, supervising consultants and in-house engineers working on feasibility studies, designs, and implementation of numerous water supply and sewage projects. Over to you, Magnus. The floor is yours. You have 7.5 minutes.
Yes. Good afternoon. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And good morning to those in the Pacific. I'm just going to present on some assistance that has been provided to my utility by sister utilities in the aftermath of recent disasters that have affected Dominica. And in the interest of time, I won't go into details of all the slides, but I'm sure the presentation can be made available to those who want it afterwards. So I will commence by just presenting some basic geographic information and demographic information about my country. That's Dominica, the nature island of the Caribbean. And now, just to briefly highlight some aspects of my company, the WASCO, the sole water provider for Dominica and responsibility for water resource management. Of course, as can be seen, we have almost universal coverage in terms of water, and we also have pre-centralized wastewater systems. Those do only cover for 20% of the population. So most of the island is served by septic tank systems. So moving on, over the past decade, we have been impacted by a few very severe weather phenomena that has wreaked havoc on our systems. This is a photograph of some flooding which took place in 2011 during Tropical Storm Ophelia. But the two main systems which have impacted us have been Tropical Storm Erica and Hurricane Maria. Now, Tropical Storm Erica affected us on August 27, 2015. And as can be seen from the data on the slide, it was mainly a rainfall event that caused quite a bit of flooding. Even at the most elevated areas, we had up to about 17 inches of rain, and about 14 inches of that actually fell in just a 5-hour period. Just 2 years later, we were impacted by Hurricane Maria, which is regarded as the worst disaster on record in Dominica. It was a Category 5 hurricane, and this photo shows the damage that was inflicted on our main office. So just some imagery of the Hurricane Maria while it was approaching Dominica. Now, Hurricane Maria did very comprehensive damage, widespread damage on the island. This is some of the data on the storm in terms of fatalities, over $1 billion in damage, and damage in basically all sectors, including the water sector. This slide shows the damage inflicted at our primary intake that serves about 40% of the population, complete siltation and blockage of the inlet structures on that intake, and some damage to the piping and some of the access features. So as I mentioned, the damage was widespread. Most of the damage was to our transmission and abstraction infrastructure, since we abstract from surface sources on our rivers. So this is just a summary of some of the nature of the damage which was inflicted on our networks. And of course, this slide just shows the amount of time that we're impacted in terms of damage. So most of our systems actually took several months to be brought back into operation. And our last system to restore actually took 15 months after the hurricane for our last system to come back on stream. And some of these were just considered as temporary repairs just to get water, not with the necessary resilience we would require. Total recovery cost was up to US 44 million. And we actually spent around 5.5 million US from our pocket just for the immediate recovery and rehabilitation activities in the aftermath. This is just an example of one of the more resilient features which we would have introduced in the new systems. So after the storm, we did a needs assessment. And of course, there were a lot of things we needed in order to restore service, like small tools and equipment, some of which were lost by the hurricane and due to looting. And of course, we needed a lot of materials, including pipes and technical assistance and labor on the ground. So this is a list of some of the organizations who provided assistance to the WASCO in the aftermath of the storm. And this is a summary of some of the interventions and the nature of the assistance they provided in terms of providing tanks, providing equipment, and even some money to actually implement recovery activities. And these are a list of the regional utilities which provided assistance post-disaster. Water Authority of Anguilla, who came on the ground to give assistance. And there was also assistance from Belize, Bahamas, and WASA in other ways. After Maria, we had assistance from Kawasa and CWWA in coordination of the assistance from various utilities. Again, Antigua and Grenada came to provide support on the ground. We had engineers from Barbados Water Authority who came to help damage assessments and redesigning of systems. We got some generators after Hurricane Maria for some of our pump systems, but our pump systems were not wired to receive those generators. So we got assistance from Belize Water Services, who came and helped us in wiring our pump stations so that we could actually use some of the generators which we have received. At the CWWA conference in Guyana, our general manager made a plea for assistance, and we had Ms. Valerie Jenkinson from World Water and Wastewater Services who formed the that we learned during the whole ordeal was the importance of having these relationships and partnerships with fellow utilities and regional agencies, and the importance of being able to communicate and coordinate all this so everything works smoothly. And of course, the importance of the country that's affected to be able to kind of drive the process and indicate what the specific needs are, or else we could be stuck in a worse situation if we do not get exactly what is needed on the ground. The timing for the support is also important. This assistance came in at the right time. If it had come too soon, in some cases, it would have just been a burden because the country was a mess for the first couple of weeks after the storm. The importance of support to the personnel, to the local operators, because they may not have food, clothes, etc. So if you can provide that kind of support, then they can focus more on the work on the ground. Also, it would be good to have some standardization among the utilities so that if we have to share fittings and pipes, etc., after a storm, that there will be compatibility. So we could even consider some sort of joint procurement. And of course, the logistics for regional transportation post-disaster, this is something that can be improved because sometimes it's very difficult to get people and materials from one island to the other after disaster. So with that, I would just like to say thank you to the utilities that assisted us, and we remain committed to assist if necessary, if they are ever in a situation as we were. Thank you.
Thank you. And it shows that engineers can be very efficient with time. And we have another engineer coming on board right away. That is Mr. Cyprian Gibson, who is a civil engineer, civil and environmental engineer by profession, and is the Assistant General Manager of the Family Islands Division of the Water and Sewage Corporation of the Bahamas. A beautiful chain of over 700 islands, I think. And so he is the man who controls all these islands. I will not go into his entire CV, which you will find online, in the interest of time. The floor is yours, Cyprian.
Okay, my assistant. Yeah, I'm just waiting on the PowerPoint to be put up. And just thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here in this sharing, especially between regions of small island states. I trust that everybody could hear me. My mic is unmuted. Okay.
Yeah,
all right. And so just want to share my experience from a regional perspective, as well as to give a local example from a Bahamian perspective. And I can go to the next slide, please. Just some background. Of course, we all know the Caribbean context as we share similar presentations. We're affected by almost every hazard identified to date: earthquakes, landslides, flooding, surges, hurricanes, volcanoes, pandemics now, again. And of course, these diverge and converge with climate change. Next slide. And I'll in interest of time, I too may be a little fast, but you can ask questions if you need to. And some examples of the costliest disasters since the year 2000. Well, this hasn't added the recent volcanoes, but for us, mostly it's been hurricanes. And we are looking at some 224 billion in losses over the last 5 years. And if we go to the next slide, and that's previous. That's hurricanes that are becoming even more, and various hazards. But when you add the fact of climate change, and I like to highlight from the Summary State of the Caribbean report from the CDB, Professor Michael Taylor highlights, and we're coming up on COP26. No doubt climate is already changing. There's no return, there's no excuse for Caribbean countries. There's no choice for us, and there should be no regrets. From the Bahamas perspective, and just to share on the next slide, a recent statement by our Prime Minister is that climate change represents the greatest existential threat to the Bahamas. As was mentioned, all those previous risks, we face all of those. As you can see from the slide, we are archipelago of islands. They're mostly low-lying. They're mostly all coastal. And it also highlighted that 15% of our GDP is threatened by climate change. 11% of our population will be affected over the years. And 74% of our main economic sector will be affected by climate change. In fact, in the last 5 years, most of our islands have been hit by a category 4 or 5. We talk about Joaquin, 113 million, Matthew, 519 million in damage, Irma, 119 million in damage, and recently, most recently, and most devastating was Dorian with 3.4 billion in damage, and we are still recovering from Dorian. Next slide, please. And this is one of the most popular depictions of the effect of damage. You can go to the next slide, and you can see the anguish and the effect. Dorian recently had devastated Abaco, and in the order of 200 plus persons have been proclaimed dead or missing. Next slide, please. What we have learned, and I share with all of my previous colleagues, and so I wouldn't emphasize what they have already said. But what we have led, it's similar. Standby power is critical. C, we have to prepare for C, damage, surges, because our water supply is on the coast. We are vulnerable to other structures. We are vulnerable to bridges, roads, electricity, communications, private wells. And we have to take all of that into account when we are planning. Of course, backup and redundancy is critical. We have water resources that are easily inundated, and so we have to protect those and build back better in our design process. In disasters and risk management, communications is critical, especially with us having archipelagos. So satellite phones, backup, utility backup with 2 service providers is important. Same thing applies for improved national and international coordination, especially in dealing with international NGOs. Of course, drills are important, constantly improve the process, educate and train staff constantly, and train the public as well and educate them, because the better the public is protected, is prepared, it also softens the blows for the utilities. And it affects hurricanes, antiquated works, and these have to be improved steadily as we modernize and build back capacity and build back stronger. Next slide, please. So some of the things we have done in building back stronger, and at the top photo, you see the storage tank that had to be fully rebuilt. You can see the structures that have to be elevated. Everything is 6 feet above ground now. And of course, we're now integrating with Abaco Sunny Waters in conjunction with UNICEF and water missions. 30% redundancy in solar paneling. On the bottom slide, you can see that all of our wells are also being protected. And with Israeli aid, we have done an upgrade in our well field monitoring process as we move forward and for the quality of our water and protection of the well field and post monitoring. Next slide, please. So from a regional perspective, we've shared, and I also share with my colleagues on the response for COVID-19. One thing I'd like to add is that we had an industrial nurse on board, and we have engaged them fully to assist us with COVID-19 monitoring, ensuring consistency and reporting, and when isolation has to occur and when persons have to come back to work. But I share the same experiences, and I share the same experiences with us in preparation. I just want to touch again from a regional perspective as we share from the Caribbean region with the Pacific region, some of the opportunities as we see it now, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are global and universal is an opportunity for us for increased funding. We've been increasingly recognized that small island states are becoming increasingly resilient over the years, and we have to build on exporting that technology. COVID-19, as we see now, has leveled the playing field, and so we need the opportunity to take advantage of that. It's increased interest in public-private participation, and there's an opportunity for us to scale up our successes. And one important point, we need to continue to bring simplicity to the multi-agency requirements. Next slide, please. So when we discuss some good success stories from the region, and we've mentioned CDB, SEDEMO, and some are listed there. I won't go into all of those, but the idea is that for us to continue to build on these mechanisms for regional cooperation and for rolling out financing and accessing financing. Very importantly in the water sector, the initiatives, CWWA, CAWASA, GWPC, Operators Without Borders, and international partners. So the key thing is being able to recognize who are those partners who are serious and who are not, because you can waste a lot of time chasing after donations. And one thing with these type of partnerships, you know quickly who can deliver, who has the capacity, who is not wasting your time. We in the Bahamas appreciate all the Caribbean countries who always lend a hand, especially with emotional support. And so continue to build on those stories and success stories. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, we must continue to cooperate and build. The 1.5 to stay alive was a very successful campaign. We see COP26 is coming up, and I trust that Pacific countries and Caribbean countries, and I see now African countries will all lend their advocacy for a real outcomes from that. So as I mentioned it already, build up, scale up our existing institutions. Recently, we are looking at the Caribbean region, an insurance initiative, and that is building on existing structures as opposed to starting something new. And of course, we all need to work collectively on the enabling environment and building these mechanisms. Next slide. To be a little bit more specific, some opportunities further. I don't know.
I'm afraid you're going to have to wrap up.
Okay,
Cyprian.
good. My last
We're out of
slide.
time.
Building partnerships, association with technocrats, interregional committees, and they're on the slide, so I don't need to get into that, but the opportunity for collaboration is there. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson, and thank you, Mr. Williams. I must make mention of Mr. Bernard Etinoff, who probably is on the call with us. He's the general manager for the WASCO, and they have proven to be, I've referred to him as Mr. Resilience, and I know he has a very resilient team in Dominica, and I think same I can say for Mr. Cyprian Gibson of the Bahamas. Over to you, Ms. Aletti. I know we are fighting against the clock, so please proceed.
Thank you, Ignatius. Okay, so we're now on to panel discussion number 2, benchmarking utilities performance and finance. As you all know, PWA has a robust benchmarking data collection in place, and it's mainly coordinated between Pacific Water and Wastewater Association with technical assistance from our World Bank colleagues. So I'll just share my screen. I'll do a brief presentation on benchmarking, and then I'll introduce my colleague from the Water Authority Fiji for the second presentation. So benchmarking under PWA. There are 31 utilities, and that's from the last data we collected back and that was 2019. We're in the process of collecting data for 2020. Total number of people supplied drinking water by our utilities is 2.8 million, or 89.5% of total residents living in service responsibility zones, with an annual turnover of $290 million. For wastewater, we have 20 utilities who are providing this service out of the 31, with a total number of people connected to wastewater of 761,000, and that's 47.5% of residents living in service, with an annual turnover as well of $51 million. So this initiative was initiated back in 2010 by ADB, and World Bank provided the technical support up to now. The database was set up in 2011, and the link there, it's on our website where you can, I won't go into it just to save time, but the link is there where you can access the portal for PWWA utilities. Okay, we use a toolkit instrument from the IBNet to collect the data from utilities. So every year the utilities are given these toolkits to collect data. We collect them annually, and these informations that we collect are used by utilities for their investment reports and their donors' proposal reports. For the benchmarking, we sort of divided our utilities into 3 groups. First group is the high income countries, or the well-established utilities. And that's basically ESPA, New Caledonia, Guam, French Polynesia, Northern Marianas. The second group are the middle income country utilities, and there's 24 utilities that falls under that that group, with a GNI per capita from 3,000 US to 20,000 US dollars. For group 3, we have utilities in transitional development stage, and 7 utilities are in that group. And they are basically just small utilities. Yeah. So an example of the data that we're collecting under this initiative is as displayed on your screen. An example is like this non-revenue water. So you have the historical data there, since 2011 to up to 2019. And from there, you're able to see how your utility is performing against other utilities. These are very good data for if you're looking at if your utility is struggling with non-revenue water, you can use this data and see which utility is doing really well, and you can work with them and see how they are dealing with resolving the non-revenue water. Same with cost recovery. We have the historical data there as well, and also comparing utilities. So the data that we're collecting is very useful for our utilities, and we use all this data for our awards as well. You also see there the tariff, comparison of tariffs from each utilities. You can see who has the cheapest and who charges the highest for water. In 2015, our board approved for us for benchmarking to include gender, and that's something we worked on since 2015. So together with World Bank, we developed some special indicators to collect the data from gender on gender from our water and wastewater utilities. These data are collected annually, and these are additional to what we already have in the toolkits for performance. Such indicators are like number of female staff, number of engineers, the salary, benefits, and remuneration paid to female staff. In 2019, we sort of tried and maybe dig deeper into the gender part of the benchmarking, looking at policies and the practices and the procedures, the training, how are they, whether gender is taken into consideration for training and that. So in 2019, from the data that we collected last year for 2019, 776 of staff are women, which is 19% of all staff for all utilities. And there's more data there. 11% of female staff are engineers. Examples like 21 out of 39 utilities, women working at French Polynesia utilities are women engineers. 70% of women in the Pacific water utilities work in the administrative and management positions. And you find it that some utilities are run by women. And that's as identified there, SWA. SWA is a team of women as their management, all at the management positions. And also, for the last highlighted point there, women's salary are normally higher than average due to seniority and utility structure. So these are all the data that we collected from the exercise that we do as part of the benchmarking. We also looked at policies in place for within each utilities, such as the maternity leave policies, whether there's any, restrictions on vacancies and that kind of stuff. So very interesting data there. As conclusion for this presentation, this is a cooperation and peer learning from utility to utility among members. We're learning every year as we're collecting data. We also develop some data quality and have some processes in place to validate the data that we're collecting, and also learning and understanding the performance of utilities. Benchmarking has sort of put our members on the map. We've got that database available where people are now looking at and see how each utilities that are under Pacific Water and Wastewater Association are performing, and our next presentation by our Water Authority Fiji colleague will present how they're utilizing this data for their investment proposals. In the pipeline, we're looking at incorporating cross-cutting issues such as climate change, pandemic, given the COVID that we're now into. We're looking at developing water operators partnership based on the data that we get from the benchmarking. We are continuing providing training for our benchmarking. We just had a refresher training on data collections earlier this year. We continue to have conversation with utilities on what they want to see as part of the benchmarking data collection. And what we also would like to see is how this data we're collecting under our database is linked to other regional database available, especially on the social and environmental impact. And that's it from my end. I would now like to introduce our colleague from Water Authority Fiji, Manasa. Did I stop sharing? Oh, okay. So Manasa works for Water Authority Fiji. He's the executive officer for institutional reform and is the acting manager for strategic planning. He is responsible and supervising the monitoring of the 11 million consultancy contract, working closely with 12 SMEC specialist experts in the area of water and wastewater towards an overall goal of enhancing capacity of water management and staff to achieve sustainable service delivery. Manasa also heads the strategic planning unit and coordinating a robust high-level strategic planning, monitoring, and reporting processes delivered to achieve WAF's strategic objectives, vision, and mission. Welcome again, Manasa, and I'll now hand over to you to do your presentation. For your presentation, sorry. Manasa?
Yes, Miss Lady, I got disconnected.
Manasa, are you there? We might have lost Manasa again. Manasseh? Should we move on to, sorry, Ignatius, should we move on to Wayne Williams while we wait for Manasseh to connect back on, just so we can save time? Ignatius, should we move on to Wayne? You're on mute, Ignatius. Oh.
Hello.
Manasseh is back on. So Manasseh, do you want to start now?
Yes. Yep. I'll start now. Sorry, I
Okay.
got disconnected. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So basically, my presentation will be just our experience here at the Water Authority of Fiji, how we have collected data, and most importantly, how we have used data, the benchmarking data to solicit funding, or donors funding to assist some of our initiatives and programs here in Water Authority of Fiji. So in terms of collection of data, we set up basically a task force or a team in-house comprising of strategic planning analysts, business analysts, and of course our graduate engineers in the technical area to look at the technical data. And then thirdly, focusing on the quality and the accuracy of the data that needs to be used for the IBNet tool, benchmarking tool, ensuring that our source of data, our system reports, are the most valuable data that we need to use. Of course, we have a mixture of manual reporting and system reporting. So we need to ensure the accuracy of this data and the quality of this data. And then, of course, once we collect that, that is quality checked by the task force. And then, of course, that is submitted to the PWWA. In terms of using this benchmarking data, so this was pulled out of the PWWA benchmarking website. So this is just comparing the operating cost coverage ratio. So this is just the utilities across the Pacific. And of course, for Fiji, we've been heavily dependent on government for funding. And our tariff, as you've seen in Ms. Ileti's presentation, is the one of the lowest in the Pacific. In fact, it's the lowest in the Pacific. So for us, with the tariff rates in terms of cost recovery over the last 5 to 7 years, it's been hovering at around 50% to 60%. So essentially, for every $1 of revenue we collect, we have to pay around $1.70 or $1.80 of our expenses. So we've used this data, especially for justifying some of our donor or investment requests. And for this is our annual water bill per household. As you can see, for every 6 cubic meters of water per month, this is the average bill throughout the utilities. So as you can see, the pink one is Fiji. So it's one of the lowest in the Pacific. So two of these critical data is what we used in terms of our proposal to the ADB and of course our Pacific Regional Infrastructure Facility in order to get assistance for a specialist to come on board and prepare a tariff proposal for us to try and increase our tariff rates. So of course we use our benchmarking data, our cost recovery and our tariffs. We approached BRIEF and ADB to fund the tariff study back in 2017. So that was completed basically in 2018 and 2019. A consultant that came over from the US prepared a tariff review report and a cost of service study report for us. And of course, after this, that was tabled to government and it's now with the regulators for us to try and increase the tariffs from where it is at the moment to new rates. So apart from tariff, this is for non-revenue water. We've used the non-revenue water benchmarking data to put forward a proposal to JICA, and as we speak, some of the specialists are here with us, helping us in leak detection areas, focused in the western areas. And of course, SMEC also is on board through ADB funding, assisting our team in the capital city here on NRW implementation program. So as you can see, NRW is high here in Fiji. It's hovering now at around 45 to 49%, and the target is to try and get it down to probably 25% in the next 5 years. So basically, that's my presentation. The importance of ensuring that we are, participating in the benchmarking exercise, providing accurate data, and also most importantly, using benchmarking data to try and solicit funding from donor agencies, from ADB, to try and fund some of our programs and our key initiatives here at the Water Authority of Fiji. Yeah, thank you so much. Minakabalewu.
Well done, Manasa. Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. See, we in the Pacific are very on time, yeah?
Yes,
I'll
indeed.
hand it over to you, Ignatius.
Thank you. Yeah, again, people in water get running on time. So I will move straight into Mr. Wayne Williams, who is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association. It's an NGO in the Caribbean based in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Williams has over 35 years experience in working in both Trinidad and Tobago and the United States. He has over 25 years supervisory experience in the environmental field. He's a past president of the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association and a guest lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and has experience with a lot of other water projects and wastewater projects in particular, which is his core area of practice. But now he's into administering the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association. Over to you, Wayne, to tell us a little more about what we're doing.
Thank you, Ignatius, and thank you to GWAPA for having me. Let me get into sharing my screen. Cognizant of the time. Let me know if you are you seeing the presentation?
Yes. Right.
Great. Set my timer. Right. So yes, good afternoon and good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Today we're going to talk a little bit from the not PWWA. Now we switch over to CWWA, Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association. Well, who are we? We are a Caribbean-based NGO of professionals operating within the water, wastewater, and solid waste sectors. And we have a mandate, several different, we're advancing knowledge, promoting actions, and being cognizant of the time. Knowledge and information dissemination, important. Public awareness, very important as well, and building alliances and synergies with organizations operating in the Caribbean with related goals, like our sister agency, CAWASA, and some of the others that were mentioned earlier. Our membership profile, just a little bit about it, it's just almost 30 years. 30 countries around not only the region, but in the world, and it keeps adding on as we go along. Mostly, we are a membership association as opposed to CAWASA, which is a utility association. So mostly members, as you can see there, and corporate. We have corporate members, utility members, and students, the whole range of membership available. Some of our key activities, of course, training and capacity building workshops, where we collaborate with others. We are known for our advocacy and collaboration. We just a couple of weeks ago, first week of October, had our annual conference and exhibition. Sadly, once again, we had to do it virtually, but it was still successful. And we're also known in the region for our high-level fora for ministers of water, wastewater, and solid waste, where we bring the government ministers responsible for those portfolios together to discuss their portfolio of information. We just finished the solid waste one last week, so we are always into public engagement campaigns, and of course, with going virtual, we do a lot of virtual activities now. Something else that we do is also really, along with CAWASA, we the WASH, Water and Sanitation and Health Disaster Response Point agencies for SEDIMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, where we did some work in Dominica, as you heard Magnus talk about. Thank you for mentioning us, Magnus. And as well, Bahamas, St. Vincent, of course, with the volcano, we were very involved in that. Guyana with the flooding, and Haiti, of course, sadly with the earthquake. So my discussion today is on the Regional Strategic Action Plan for the Water Sector in the Caribbean to develop resilience to the impacts of climate change, better known as the RSAP, RSAP. And so we see there the hurricanes blowing off Africa there over the years. So we have a Regional Strategic Action Plan for water and wastewater. And up until recently, we had a first implementation plan of regional level responses. 5 pillars on which this is done: climate resilient water governance, climate informed decision support, where you see there deficient data collection and data use, climate resilient water resources management, where you see the third bullet, deficient data collection and data use, climate resilient water services provision, of course, lack of data there as well, and capacity building and sensitization for climate resilience. Data, that's what we're talking about today, data collection. It needs to be a prioritization. It needs to be a priority by governments and utilities. It has not been enough over the years, and there's an increasing cry in the region for data collection, and so that you can have data-driven decisions, as you see there in the third bullet. Everyone here knows we need to collect data, so I'm not going to preach to the choir, but it needs to be a priority, and that is coming to a head right now in the Caribbean. So our RSAP had a first implementation plan, but hot off the press, I don't even have a pretty cover yet for the second implementation plan, which was just completed, just launched over the last couple of weeks. The second implementation, the update, IP 2021, we call it, that is fresh with new ideas. Some of the previous implementation plan items were carried over because COVID decimated most people's work plans in 2020 and mostly 2021. Coming out of that, one of the parts of that is the data. The purpose of the data collection is to gather information on the investments that are being made or a plan to be made in water sector assets over the next 5 years. The information will be used to update the RSAP for water inventory. The inventory will inform water sector partners as to what activities are taking place, where there are potential synergies, and where further investments could be targeted. It's important. Just as a brief look at some of the one of the data forms in the RSAP implementation plan 2021, you can see and the projects go to the right. Each project will fill in the information. You got the infrastructure stuff, goals and objectives, pipelines, pump stations, treatment works. What you're trying to find out is the information on these different projects, legislative review and change. Then you have the softer stuff, organizational plans, feasibility studies, systems and software, decision support systems, monitoring, community outreach, very important for most projects. And then you get into some of the techie stuff in terms of technician stuff, reduction in non-revenue water. The numbers are too high in the Caribbean. They float around between 35 and 60% of non-revenue water. And many of the governments, but not all, have understood fully that number needs to come down, and in different ways. It's not just fixing leaks. There's a lot more to it than just fixing leaks. Energy use efficiency. Most of the islands don't have oil like here in Trinidad and Tobago, so their energy costs are high, and so they're moving forward very quickly in becoming more efficient with their energy use. looking into renewable energy, looking into water reuse, and I would be wastewater reuse, but the water reuse, you're just throwing away treated water that you could be using somewhere downstream. And of course, stormwater management, etc. And then we're looking at the money aspect of it. Name of the funding agency, value of the funding, any counterpart funding that's in addition, that's important, value of the funding, name of the agency implementing the initiative, and then some dates and times, and some other information, in terms of, because what we looked at this year is that at one point there were 4 different consultancy projects that were asking the same people for the same information. So what we did with CWWA, we worked with our partners to split up the folks that they were trying to get the information from, and sent a letter to each, and I'm saying, listen, we're gonna ask you this once. We're collecting the information. So they split up the different agencies they needed to get information from, and came back at the end, and everybody shared the information they got from their agencies that they were allocated to go and look at. And it worked pretty well. There's nothing out of utility here. It's more than 5 people asking them for the same information 5 different times. So that worked pretty well, and we're using that. We will be going forward with that model in the future. Some of the pillars that we talked about, well, these are the pillars, and remember, recognize the first one, even though I said it quickly: climate resilient water governance, where we're looking at governance as a key word there, institutional, legal, legislative frameworks. You need to have that. You need to have the policies, as part of the government. And I know you all can read the slides after, because it's been recorded. That's the first, and the second component is climate resilient water resources management. So you're looking at quantifying what you have, how you develop and adopt the IWRM plans, integrated water resources management plans, catchment management, public engagement, community involvement. All that is important. All that is important in managing your water resources, and with the drive of making them climate resilient. The third component, which is our third pillar, is climate informed decision support. We're looking at data management that we're talking about today. We're looking at management planning, water resources management planning, for responsiveness to climate effects. It's important to manage what you have. Component 4, climate resilient water services. We're looking to reduce the water demand. We're looking to optimize the efficient use of water resources. We're looking to improve energy efficiency. I'm looking to improve the performance of the water and sanitation sector. And all of this is driven by data. Component 5, capacity building and public education for climate resilience. We're looking to promote and encourage regional learning, support training and capacity building, engage in comprehensive public awareness campaigns, not just little small things just to report back that you spoke to people, but comprehensive. Monitoring and evaluation of this implementation of the RCEP. And then as a subcategory, research and development, always important. We need to coordinate the research and identify the research needs. So my time is coming short here. So I just listed some projects here that we're looking at in over the next year. Some of them were carried over from last year. Developing the skills bank, so you all can go to our website and send in your resumes. Training and development, monitoring and tracking. Here's our continued work with Kawasa on the Kariwap Aqua Rating Program. We're looking to develop WASH programs regionally with UNICEF and some other agencies, and with the EU and UNEP. So conference next year is in Cuba. So see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. That was excellent. Unfortunately, because of time constraints, we will not be able to take questions and answers at this point. We're going to move straight over into the next panel with Mr. Letty on the PWWA's Young Operators Program.
Thank you, Ignatius. And let me share my screen first. Okay. Our Pacific Young Water Professional Program. Just some background on this program. The first Young Water Professional Program was held in Samoa back in 2017, and this was held in parallel with the 10th Pacific Water and Wastewater Conference. This was a major capacity development program for our young water professionals in the Pacific, and it's funded by Australian Water Partnership up to 2022. So there's 30 utility representatives and that are actively participating every year in this program. The main objectives of this program is for young water professionals to be engaged early on issues and challenges facing the sector. It was also an opportunity created for them to share learnings, knowledge, and best practice. Um, an opportunity also to be mentored by their current managers on the sector in the Pacific, and also a learning experience to build confidence for them. So with this program came new energy into our association, and in realizing the sustainability in the water and wastewater sector. With this program, also, we're building regional knowledge sharing and collaboration through peer to peer connection and networking, recognizing the cultural and traditional knowledge as a source of expertise. So, we're making capacity building, leadership development, and improved communication as core management functions with this young water professional group. Um, Supporting our young water professional and aspiring water professionals to make a difference. You see through this program, they are bringing in a lot of new ideas, and excited to be part of the program. They are advocating for the principles of gender equity and social inclusion. So every year we do young water professionals, and we also do social and gender equity sessions for them. We're fostering an environment that promotes innovation, and also transforming management trends to reflect the values that um, uh, laid out for this program. So the outcome of this program in the last previous years, it became one of the flagship program for PWWA. It's now one of the well-coordinated group in the Pacific region under for the water and wastewater sector. We have this group of more informed group on broader issues and challenges that are facing our sector in the Pacific. So we still have the ongoing mentoring program with management level. And also the efforts of these young water professionals are being recognized regionally through our Young Water Professional of the Year awards that we usually have during our annual conferences. For the future of this program, we are looking at developing a program for innovative projects that young water professionals attendees can develop. Building the program to be an accredited course in collaboration with institutions such as USB or APTC. We're looking at creating more awareness or more exposure for these young groups into other region sister programs. So maybe looking at getting them to be exposed to what the Caribbeans are doing on a sister program if there's such, and also just increasing participation at the national level to make sure water and wastewater sector are being represented. So those are some of the ideas we have in the pipeline for the future of this program. And yeah, just a couple of pictures from some of our young water professionals program that we've had in the last years with the Young Water Professional winner last year from ASPA, American Samoa Power Authority. And that's it from our Young Water Professional program.
Okay, so considering in the interest of time, I think we are almost at the end, and so I will, as we are speaking about young professionals, I will defer and allow Nicole to go ahead of me. And if there is any time left, I will just get a short window to say what we're doing about the Kawasa webinars. But please go ahead, Nicole, and just let us know a little about our continuing education program and your own experiences.
Hi, good morning for those in the Pacific. Good evening for those here in the Caribbean and all the other time zones in between. It's good to have you here with us. From last year, Kawasa would have been.
Sorry, I did not introduce you, but you should introduce yourself and say which utility.
Nicole Austin. I'm from Barbados Water Authority. I'm the water quality technologist. Yes. So from last year, Kawasa would have been hosting some webinars every Wednesday for an hour or sometimes a little bit over an hour, where they had persons from the region. So you were in this pandemic, you were unable to leave, but you were still connected to the other persons within your region working with water and wastewater to get knowledge. And it was a great way to spend the time when you were safe at home. And from that, they continued with the help with Operators Without Borders, Valerie Jenkinson. She would have introduced us to some tutors, Mike Gosselin, Mike Furlot, and Mike Ippin, where they would have taught us information that we were able to tackle the Association Board of Certification, the ABC exams, and we were successful in doing water treatment, water distribution, and being certified also in wastewater treatment and wastewater collection. And from my experience, it was really a good eye opener to have that time with webinars as well as tutorial sessions with persons from outside of the region as well as within the region, where you could be interactive and speak to them about what challenges they're having and techniques and systems that they're using within their water treatment and water distribution, the similarities, the differences, and you were able then to be confident within your own profession and have this pride to know that the same way that I'm doing these exams, we have Shannon, for example, from the WASCO. He's also doing them. You grew a network and you have this group of persons that when you log on online, you're looking forward to seeing them in the participant list. And it was, as I said, you were safe from home and you still have restrictions within our region in terms of movement, flying out. So you're not getting a chance to do any twinning with the other utilities, but at least you can still have this connection and get more education and become certified and be part of a network of certified water operators within the Caribbean, within the region, within the international body. So that's it for me. That was my experience.
Well, thank you, Nicole, for being so efficient with the time. It just gives me 2 minutes to do the slide presentation I had. I wouldn't be long with this either. Just go through it and then we can wrap up. I think Ivy is giving us another 10 minutes. So you can put up my second set of slides, please. I'm unable to get mine going in the interest of time. Do you have them, Florencia? Okay, good. Okay, so what Nicole presented was just as she stated, that we've had this situation, and we normally would be have tutors going to the various islands to do practical training and holding workshops. But because of the COVID-19 experience, it really forced us into going to totally virtual with our training. Next slide, please. And so that the whole it has been sort of uncharted waters. We were trying to find the best practices for our operators, particularly in the response to the pandemic. But I mean, nobody anticipated what it was all about, so we were learning as we went by, and it really helped to keep our operators current and to be able to share the lessons learned and the various lessons learned and so on. And of course, we use the Zoom platforms. We are able to keep the records because that platform allows us to do the record keeping. And of course, we have everything archived so that students can always, participants, operators can also review those on the Kawasa website or our YouTube channels and on the Kawasa Education. And for the purposes of continuing education records and to earn credits to be continued certified by Kawasa and the ABC, you get 0.1 of an hour of credit for each session you attend that goes on for 1 hour. So those of you who are attending today's session, you could keep note of this and you will be rewarded accordingly. Next slide, please. And that was just to give you some analytics of our viewership. So I urge you again to continue viewing us so that we can increase our numbers and we can see that you're really participating. But because we are trying to monitor everything that is going on. Next slide, please. And the summary we've had over since June of 2020 to date, we have had some 48 such webinars. So we have missed a few Wednesdays for various reasons when we have other activities that clashes with ours. And we basically look at the areas of water treatment, water distribution, wastewater treatment, with the tutorials done with the compliments of the Operators Without Borders of Canada. And we also had some very good training sessions for our human resource managers and operators in the softer skills of human resource management and into leadership. So we had a series called the Virtual Leadership Series brought to us by the John Maxwell Certified Coach. Next slide, please. And our webinars, of course, we've had those peer-to-peer workshops, as we call them. Again, we've had support from the Operators Without Borders in dealing standard operating procedures for disaster management and the Incident Command System 100 course, which was oversubscribed on 2 occasions. We offered it not only to Kawasa's operators, but in the wider Caribbean region for people involved in the water sector and emergency services, including those in the power sector. And I think that should be taking me to an end. And thank you very much for this. And you can also go to our website, our Facebook pages, and our YouTube pages, and you're going to get all the information on us. And I think that takes us to trying to wrap up as best as possible within the time frame that we have. Over to you, Julie, if you're present.
Yeah, hi. Let me turn my camera back on as well. Hi, thanks very much. Thank you very much for trying to get us back on track for the timing. Our platform here has accommodated an extra few minutes for us, but we need to wrap up because this hour is a bit strange for them as well. So we were going to have a bit of a brainstorm together about how we could, collaborate more between the 2 regions. There's obviously an enormous amount of sharing that is going on between the utilities within each of the regions. But there's clearly also some advantages in reinforcing those linkages between the regions. There's a lot that has been identified today that I won't get into. I just want to quickly name a few things that I think we could do to strengthen this relationship going forward and try to make this MOU that we signed in 2015 a little bit more tangible and real. There's obviously an enormous amount of thematic commonality, and you're facing obviously many of the same issues, particularly when it comes to disaster risk management and resilience around climate change. Those ones strike me as incredible, what you're facing and what everybody is grappling with independently. So there's obviously an enormous amount of room for exchange there. One of the obvious first ways of doing this is through more regular meetings like this one. This hour is a little strange here, but for it seems to work reasonably well for your two regions. So this is something we could think about replicating. There's also, a number of webinars that we've been holding on different thematic topics, and these could also be, planned around the specific issues that you are facing, at an hour that is more convenient. GeoUp is also now developing, and you can see a lot of this on our website. We've recently launched our community of practice and are developing that quite a lot with a number of new or renewed spaces for discussion, networking, and collaboration between operators, between regions on specific themes, which I think presents quite a lot of opportunity for us. We can support in boosting this cooperation. We're really keen on seeing this discussion continue, and I think in our upcoming sessions, Ignatius, Minicity, we can talk about this a little bit more. We look forward to all of your ideas also about how to strengthen this partnership between these two beautiful and vulnerable regions that are facing some pretty serious challenges. So we look forward to supporting you in doing that in whatever way we can. And now I pass it back to you, Ignatius and Micheletti, for any bit of small wrap up or summary that you'd like to make before we have a final closing video at the end of this session.
Go ahead, Micheletti.
Thank you, Julie, and also everyone for the presentations. I think throughout the whole sessions, we kind of, as Julie mentioned, learned that there is a lot of areas we can collaborate on and we can work together on. In terms of disaster risks, I think it's very important for us to learn from each other, and also what from each perspective, and see which works and which didn't, and how we can share those issues, and also those ideas that we did shared, and also with benchmarking for PWWA. It's a very great platform for our utilities, and we're willing to share with our Caribbeans on how we can work together to collect the data and support our utilities with their investment proposals. So having those data available, readily available, is very important. And also with knowledge management, sharing and mentoring, and at the management level and also at the young water professional level is important. Bringing up those young leaders to be involved in the and to be more aware on the issues and emerging issues that are coming up on this sector. It's always important for them to be more aware and building on building their knowledge and also their capacity. So because they are the future leaders of these sectors. And I think, as Julie mentioned, there is a lot of ways we can collaborate more, and we would like to see more of this regional meetings, regional sharing, and on this platform together with GWOPA. I think GWOPA can really assist the two regions by facilitating our meetings, and also bringing together the two regions on various issues that we do have in the region. So that's
Yeah, well, thank you very
Q&A.
much, Ms. Letty, and everyone else for participating. My colleagues, I have to thank our president, Chris Husbands, and the president of the CWWA, who may be listening to the call, Mrs. Sarah Jade Govaya, who we really, because they were busy into the CWWA conference, we didn't get all the time to bring all the high leaders into the program. But I think what we have reinitiated here is excellent. I think there was some excellent presentations referring to some areas that we have discussed in our own region about joint procurement. I think that came from the Fiji Water Authority of Fiji, ICT standards, etc. And I think there's so much that we have to share, so many commonalities. Our differences are very similar. And I think we would be able to use the platform that we have, these virtual platforms, at convenient hours to us. I know it's early morning for you and it's late in the evening. It's not very convenient for you, Julie and Jiwapa at Bonn, but we thank you so much for putting all of this together. It's been a very good Congress, albeit virtual, and we're happy for the participation of the Caribbean region. I would like to thank Wayne Williams and all the participants from the Caribbean for joining us.
Thanks so much. I would like to just request that everybody put their cameras on just for a little goodbye.
Yeah.
Hello, goodbye. Thank you.
Yeah, put your cameras on so we can take a group photo.
Yeah. And a big thank to Florencia
Florencia,
for
yes.
having put
Excellent
a lot of
job.
effort into organizing this session. Thank you,
And Ms.
Florencia.
Letty and the AV team. Thank you very much.
What? Already over?
No, we have plenty more options to continue the discussions and peer exchange beyond the Congress.
Tell me more. What are the options?
Well, SHIWOPA membership, for example. By becoming a member of SHIWOPA, everyone can connect to a global alliance of practitioners and experts. There are two ways of becoming a member. First, institutional members. Institutions can participate in SHIWOPA's assemblies and are eligible to run and vote in its international steering committee elections. Or second, individual members. Individuals can connect and engage with peers in the online SHIWOPA community. We have created a space that allows for networking and easy communication. Meet future WOP partners, stay up to date on project opportunities, and participate in peer-to-peer learning opportunities.
Sounds great. How can I join?
Simply go to www.shiwopa.org and register for free. If you want to know more, you can follow SHIWOPA on social media and subscribe to the newsletter. Thanks for joining the 4th Global WOPS Congress. We'll see you soon.